Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Hope y'all are having a great day. And with my college football season predictions done, now that I've done every conference, figured I'd turn my attention to the NFL. The season just around less than 4 weeks, or it'd be 4 weeks this Wednesday from the opening game. So I figured I would do division by division predictions, and then right before the season, I'll do my full season predictions with award winners, playoff predictions, and all that. But figured I'd do my division predictions, starting off with the AFC East today and making my way through the rest of the NFL divisions. So, with no further ado, let us get into it. Starting off with the opening game, which New England is a part of, at Seattle, a rematch of the Super Bowl. And I do think New England did improve. You know, they bring in A.J. Brown, Romeo Dobbs to improve that receiving game. The offensive line should be better with Caleb Lomu. The defense did lose some pieces, but I think will still be really talented. But I do think Seattle, defending the home turf, gets the win to start off. Went on to week two, Steelers, Patriots. Should be a fun game. Remember, I think these two played week three, I think it was. Or maybe week two, I forget. It was early in the season like this. The Steelers basically won that game because New England kept on coughing up. I do think in their home opener, they do get the win. They don't start 0-2, which is a hard start to come from. So I do think they get the win there. Moving on to their week three game at Jacksonville. Should be a fun one. Two teams that exceeded expectations. What are they going to look like now that they have to play tougher schedules and teams, aren't going to be playing them, wondering how to play them. Like, they're going to have a game plan ready. But I'm going to pick the Patriots on the road. I do think Jacksonville is a team to regress. Like, I don't think they're going to like fall back down to like one of the worst teams in the league. But I do think the offense should be clicking in gears. Um, with you two and Liam Cohen, but we'll see how that defense looks like, especially after they lose Devin Lloyd. How does Travis Hunter look as a full time corner now? So I think New England gets the win, but I do think at home, I mean on the road, they do lose to the Bills this time. I know they won that game last year, but it was very much due to Josh Allen turning over the ball a lot. And while he does do that a lot, I do think early on in the season, the Bills trying to, get back to being on the top. I think they get the win. So 2-2 up to this part through 4 weeks. I think they do beat the Raiders in week five. Should be a not convincing win, but I think should be a easy win for the most part. Do think they beat the Jets in week six to move to 4-2. Moving on to week seven at the Bears. Should be a fun game between two teams with young, exciting quarterbacks. Both teams very much in the thick of things in the playoffs. 4-2, New England. I'm gonna say they lose this one to Chicago, which might seem crazy. I do think the Bears defense will be better from last year. I think the offense will improve, be more consistent on a daily basis. And I think a Thursday game, short week, New England coming off, back to back wins at home. I feel like the Bears could spring, an upset, I guess, over New England. Moving on to week eight against Miami. Patriots known, under Bill Belichick for having, not playing. They're losing a lot of those games in Miami because of how hot it is, and it's usually been the kryptonite, but Miami isn't very good this year. I do think they will be competitive in this game, but I think the Pats get the win, move back up to 5-3. Week nine against the Packers, a fun one. Used to be the Rogers Brady Bowl. Now it could be the Love May Bowl. And I'm gonna say Green Bay on the road gets the win. I think you know this will be a tougher schedule for New England, and I think they definitely could lose some of these games to really good teams, whether on the road or at home. Moving on to week 10 as we enter the second half of the season at Detroit in Germany. So I'm going to say the Lions get that win, which does seem crushing. They enter 5-5 at the bye, which does seem, after being amazing last year, it does seem like hard, but I just feel like a tougher schedule. They have a lot of games that they definitely could lose, which definitely could lead them to um not being as good. The Chargers game off the bye in week 12. They're 5-5 right now, so kind of need the urgency. But I'm gonna say the Chargers at home get the win. I think the defense, will still be pretty good. No, they lost Jesse Minter, but I still think the Chargers defense will be really talented, and that offense, I think by the time in this season should be clicking into high gear, which drops New England to 5-6. But I do think they win these next two at home. I do think they split with the Bills. You know, I don't think Buffalo sweeps them. I think they split just like they did last year. And then Thursday night, Minnesota coming into their building should be a fun game. But I think they get the win. So 7-6 entering the final half of the rest of their season. I think the Chiefs win this game. I think Mahomes will definitely be, fully acclimated late into this year. I think the Chiefs at home in Arrowhead will be, pushing for a playoff berth, and 7-7. I think they beat the Jets to sweep them. 8-7. I think they beat the Broncos at home and Miami at home to finish what I think 10-7. I want to say, right? Yeah, 10-7. It is a decrease in wins, but they still go 5-1 in the division, 9-3 in the conference. So they still, play really good football. It's just a tougher schedule where, they don't play a lot of teams that, are going to be bad, which is kind of hard for them to win as many games as they do. But that should be enough to, I think, make it to the playoffs. We'll see how, the rest of my predictions go, how New England fares. Moving on to the Bills, who we have splitting with New England. Starting off week 1 against the Texans on the road. I think this is a spot where they could slip up and lose, which might seem crazy, but think about it. New head coach in Joe Brady, new DC, so mostly new staff, taking on, going on the road to take on a Texans team that has, in my opinion, the best defense in the league, that got better on offense, should be, more consistent. It could be a letdown spot. The Bills, you know, have been known to have early season losses where it's confusing, and I feel like that Houston one definitely could be it. But I do think they win these next two at home, which would put them at 3-1 since I have them being New England. The Detroit game and this is a really hard stretch. The first 5 games is really hard. All of these teams I think could be in the playoffs, either winning their division or being a wild card, making a deep run. So this is a really hard stretch. I think they do lose to the Rams, but if they can come out 3-2 in that first 5 stretch, I think it really boosts their confidence for how they do the rest of the season. I think they beat the Raiders on the road, 4-2 before their bye. So they win their fourth one. They at least feeling good off the bye. I do think they beat the Ravens. As a Ravens fan, I don't want to say it, but they are at home off the bye I feel like that could be a spot where they definitely can um get back, move to 5-3, or no, 5-2. I think they lose to Minnesota and beat the Jets. I think that Vikings game Monday night. I do think Minnesota will be a really good team this year, and I think it could be a spot where the Bills, coming off a physical game, a really tough game against the Ravens, they might be exhausted going to Minnesota. I could see them losing that game and falling to 5-3, and then they beat the Jets to move to 6-3. So we look at the second half of their schedule. I think they beat the Dolphins to move to 7-3. Ooh, the Chiefs one. It's a tough one. It's Thanksgiving at home. They've known to be able to beat them. I'm gonna say they do. I think they beat them 8-3, and then losing to the Patriots. So 8-4. Entering their last 5 games at the road, on the road in Green Bay. Should be a really good game. Ugh, this is a tough one to pick. 8-4. So the Bills firmly, trying to secure a top seed. They just lost to New England, so back-to-back road games. Ugh, it's a tough one. Mm, I'm gonna say, they lose to Green Bay, beat Chicago at home. I think they beat Denver. I am high on Denver. I think they definitely could be a really talented team, but I do think they'll regress. And they beat the Dolphins and the Jets. So I think finish 12-5? Yeah, 12-5, which first place in this division. It's a tough schedule for the Bills. Really hard conference. Really hard schedule. They're really throughout, like the early half, and then really like there's no real hard stretch. There's no real easy stretch for like them. Like maybe outside of like a couple games against the Jets and Bills, but even those are division games, so it's not like they're gonna be easy. But 12-5, the same record they had last year, but I think it does get them to win the division. Moving on to the Dolphins, who might be one of the worst teams in the league. It is a tough schedule they play. There's no real game you could technically say they win. But they do take on the Raiders in week 1. Should be a fun game between two first year head coaches, two teams with new quarterbacks hoping to find a new identity. Um Raiders, Dolphins. Yeah, I think I don't know. Yeah, I think Miami gets that win. I think both first year head coaches. I think Jeff Hafley's going to have this defense playing really well, and I think Miami could go into Vegas and pull off. I guess consider it an upset because most people have the Raiders ahead of the Dolphins. Do think they lose to the Niners and the Chiefs and the Vikings and the Bengals before their bye. Sorry, Miami. It is a tough stretch. Um, they would start 1-4. Um, the Jets game, I think they split with the Jets, so I'll say New York gets that home win. Um, at home against Detroit, I feel like they could spring an upset, but I'm not gonna say so. You know what? I'm gonna say they beat the Colts. I'm not that high on Indy. Daniel Jones is coming off a torn Achilles. Will he play? At least, if is he going to be available early on in the season? If not, is it Anthony Richardson? Is it Riley Leonard? Some people think they could trade for J.J. McCarthy. That now that he is no longer, he's not going to be the starter. At least early on in the season, we'll see how it goes. Um, they did lose a lot of pieces. And I do think this Colts team very competitive, but it is hard for them. Like I'm not high on Indy because I think that collapse might have been what does them in. And maybe if Daniel Jones, even if he is healthy, will he be playing at the level we saw pre-injury, or like right before the injury when he was starting to play more like his Giants form? And I think the Colts could be in for a tough season. So what's their record? They are 2-8 after that Bills game. I do think they beat the Jets to split that series of 3-4, 3-8, 3-9. I mean, this Bears game could be interesting. I'm gonna say they lose it. Jeff Halfley returned to Green Bay. Sorry, I think they lose that one, and I think they lose to the Chargers, which I think would be 3-14. Not the season I feel like the Dolphins would want, but it's a rebuilding year where the team not very talented. It's a really hard season, and I think the Dolphins definitely are looking forward to next season. Very much are hoping for some progress to see like if Willis is the guy, to see if maybe guys step up and can be key pieces on this offense outside of Achan, and maybe hoping the defense, which isn't very talented, could maybe step up and be better. But 3-14, I think, is definitely, I feel like, a better outcome than I feel like most people would have them. Moving on to the Jets, the final team in the AFC East. Um, week one, I think they lose to Tennessee. I think Robert Saleh says, y'all shouldn't have fired me. Week two, I think could be interesting because, remember Green Bay, two guys won't be there in Parsons and Kraft. Who knows about Josh Jacobs? So Green Bay very much um will be scrambling. They did play Minnesota, and depending on how that game is, maybe mm, you know what? I'm gonna say the Jets get the win. I'm gonna say they pull off the upset, which might seem crazy, but I do think this offense will be better with Geno Smith. A veteran QB that should have this offense more efficient. And early on against the Packers team that, you know, depending on how the team, you know, is feeling after that blown lead against the Bears in the wild card and all the uncertainty with injuries and question marks about players whether they'll be playing or not, mainly Josh Jacobs, and a roster that is not very talented. I definitely feel like that could be a letdown spot early on against the Jets team that I think could be decent this upcoming year. And I think this offense can be better. I think the defense hopefully will be better, but we'll just have to find out. I do think they lose these next two, but I do think they beat the Browns, which would actually put them at what 3-4 through their first 7 games, which would much better than their winless start last year. Raiders, Jets. I'm gonna say the Jets win that one at home. Chiefs, I will end that little winning streak right there to drop them to 4-5. 4-6. Um, after the Bills loss, I think they lose to the Chargers, and then they enter their bye at 4-8. Much better season than I anticipated. I think they lose to Denver. I do think they beat the Cardinals. I'm not very high on Arizona, especially with what's going on. And then I think they lose to Minnesota, which would put them at, I think, what, 5-12? Yeah, 5-12, which much better season than last year. I definitely think the Jets could maybe get to 6 wins, maybe 7, and be a very decent team this upcoming year. Like, I think the Jets are much improved. Don't think they're going to be, playoff contender level, but do think they'll be somewhat decent And I do think, the Jets definitely could finish with a better record than most people are giving them credit for. 5-12, maybe 6-11 or 7-10. I feel like 7-10 probably is like the ceiling of this team. But 5-12 seems like a good middle point where it's like they're not really bad, especially if they're 4-4 through their first 8 games. If even if that happens, maybe 3-5 if they lose to Green Bay, but would still be a much improved year from last year where they were the last team to win a game. So I definitely think the Jets can be better, and I think 5-12 is a really good middle point where it's like they're not gonna be like great, but they're not gonna be like so bad like they were last year. But yeah, those are my AFC's predictions. The Bills 12-5, maybe 13-4. There are some games on the schedule I can see them winning, but I do think it's a really hard schedule for the Bills where it's like there's not many parts of it where like they're guaranteed wins. So I definitely think the Bills will have a tough stretch. New England 10-7, which we'll see how the rest of the AFC goes, but it should be at least right there in the playoff mix. I think a harder schedule means they're not going to have a lot of easy wins on the schedule, but should be really good. And a much improved roster just might not turn out as much wins because of a tougher schedule. I just said the Jets 5-12, really tough season, but hey, maybe if they do get off to a really good start, maybe if they pull off an upset against the Packers, maybe if they beat the Titans in week 1, um, we could be looking at this Jets team finishing with 6, 7, maybe I don't know 8 wins. And then Miami, this is definitely a rebuilding year, looking towards the future. 3-14, I think maybe you could maybe they get to 4 or 5 wins, maybe 6. That might be like their ceiling if like everything goes well, but should be really good. I mean, not really good, but should be a developmental year where like they see what players are long-term pieces on this team, and maybe Jeff Halfley has this team playing better than they should, and maybe the future looks brighter for Miami. But that'll do it for um, today's video. Hope you guys like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Check me out on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. And I'll catch you guys in tomorrow's video for my NFC East predictions. But until then, hope you have a great day, and bye.